Hello again and welcome back. In this lesson, I'm going to cover raster mosaicing, which is the process by which we can take many different rasters and turn them into one raster. Think about how rasters are very data dense. With many rows and many columns of data points, we can get very large files very quickly. Well, mosaicing helps us solve this because many people and many distribution centers like data download sites like to divide up rasters into regions. So you download only the areas you need and it makes data management easier. Well, once you download all these different subparts, these different regions, you need to put them back together again. And raster mosaicing is how we do that. So first, I have these folders here where I unzipped 6 different data downloads that are digital elevation model files from the National Elevation Dataset, or NED, for part of New York State. And inside each of these, I have a bunch of different files. I have a shapefile containing some boundary information. I have an imagine image file, and then I have thumbnails and some metadata and other README information. They come with a lot of different pieces, but what I really need from the spatial side is this image file. And if you forgot that imagine images were a raster format, even just the size tells me here's the spatial data. So let's drag this into ArcMap, and ArcMap will load it, and let's take a look at it. So we have this approximately square digital elevation model for some area. We could add a base map and see, but let's not right now. And we can also add our other layers. So if we bring back up Windows, I can drag these other files in here. Go back, drag the rest of these in. And these are all independent files here. And occasionally they come in slightly different folder structures, but the imagine image is what I really want. The .ovr file here, as a side note, is the pyramids file that gets built by ArcMap, which helps it display rasters at different resolutions more quickly. It's sort of like an index that it uses to display rasters as I zoom in and out. So then if I add the rest of these still, and then I zoom out, I can see that it seems like I have 6 rasters here. And I can tell, even though they're basically seamless from a perspective of data coverage, there are seams from the perspective that they're each being scaled relative to their own minimum and maximum values. So I get this bright white here, even though the values at the edge here are probably similar to the values here. And that's because they all have a different low and high values that they're getting symbolized by. Now, I can also right now turn one on and off so that I can hide them and view them differently. But what if I want to analyze data that crosses some of these boundaries? I don't want to split it up and analyze it against multiple rasters repeatedly. That's error prone and needless effort. Well, raster mosaicing will help me put these rasters together into one that I can use for my analysis. To do that, sort of counterintuitively, I need to first create a mosaic data set. So in ArcCatalog, or the catalog window, I'm going to create a new geodatabase just so you can follow along with me, but you can use an existing geodatabase as well. So I'll right click, I'll go to New, File Geodatabase, and I'll just call this my digital elevation model database. And in any geodatabase, even one that already has data, I can right click on it and go to New, Mosaic Dataset. If I click on it, I get a new geoprocessing tool popping up saying Create Mosaic Dataset. And I can give it a name, and I'll call it Ithaca, New York, because that's the area that's approximately covered by this. And then I need to specify a coordinate system. And it says a coordinate system for all of the items in the mosaic dataset. So let's check out what that is. I'm going to right click on one of these and go to Properties and go to Source and see that these are in the geographic NAD83 coordinate system. So the North American 1983 coordinate system, and I can find that when I go searching for it. And I know in this case that this one is NAD 1983, but let's try searching for the exact string that it gave me in the data properties, and that way you can find other ones as well if you have different rasters. So it's GCS underscore North underscore American underscore 1983. So let's try that. GCS underscore North underscore American underscore 1983. I search and it gives me 4. And it's probably this one. But if I really wanted to confirm, or I could do this another way, I could see that under the layers option, it's telling me that this particular coordinate system is in use by one or more layers in my document. So we'll use this instead. And under product definition, we can tell ArcGIS a little bit about what kind of data we're storing. A lot of this has to do with aerial or satellite imagery, and so we're just going to use none. And that indicates that there's no band ordering because we just have one band in our rasters. And for now, we'll ignore the rest of the features in here, but if you start creating more advanced raster mosaic datasets, you will want to use these. And we'll click OK to create our new mosaic dataset, and it runs in the corner like all our other tools. And now inside the geodatabase, I have an empty raster mosaic dataset, which is displayed as this sort of cascade of rasters here. I also get in my table of contents a new grouped layer of the raster mosaic dataset, which has the images themselves, the footprints, and the boundaries. But again, there's nothing in it because if I turn everything else off by control clicking on it to turn everything off and then turning it back on, there's still nothing. And in fact, if I zoom to layer, I go all the way out to the whole world in the scale up here. I'm not seeing anything. So let's zoom back to these layers. And let's add some rasters to our mosaic. So there are 2 ways we can go about this. First, we can go to Arc Toolbox and under the data management tools in raster and then the mosaic dataset toolset, there are a bunch of tools for managing mosaic datasets here. And there's one called Add Rasters to Mosaic Dataset. For now though, let's keep up the trend we're using in the catalog window, and I'm going to right click on it and go to Add Rasters. And surprise, surprise, it pops up the Add Rasters to Mosaic Dataset tool. And one thing that's cool is it gives me the option to provide a workspace instead of individual files. Workspace being a folder or a geodatabase or something like that. So if I've already stored all of my rasters in one spot, I can just provide that and it will load all rasters from that location. Or I can choose to provide files or datasets, where a dataset is much more like the rasters we're used to. So since we're using rasters in our table of contents here, I'll select Dataset, and then let's drag all of these over onto the source area here. And it's giving me a warning. It says datum conflict between input and output. For now, let's ignore the warning and see what happens. We'll want to be aware that we had a warning, but it may be just fine. I know that I selected the coordinate system from at least one of these layers, and I believe all of the layers because it only gave me a single coordinate system from the layers in the map document. So I think I should be fine since the mosaic dataset and these layers should have the same coordinate system. But let's see. And I can have it update the cell size ranges, update the boundary, and update overviews. I'm going to select those because overviews provide us with a lot more quick information about our mosaic datasets. If I don't do that, I may not get to see the mosaic dataset in ArcMap very well. And then I can specify things related to generating pyramids and a bunch of advanced options that we're going to ignore for now. And I'll click OK to add those to the mosaic dataset, and it's running. And it can take a little while, but when it's done, notice that it pops back up in our map document, even though I haven't turned these layers back on. Our mosaic dataset now has that information. I can turn off the images and still see the footprints. And then the boundary, if I turn that on, will show up as well. So that's the overall mosaic boundary. And then I have the individual raster footprints that I can see. And then I can see the images if I turn that on as well. It also, as long as I calculate statistics when I generate the mosaic, tells me my new high and low. And notice that we now are symbolizing on one continuous basis between all these rasters. They are behaving as one raster now because they effectively are. I can use this mosaic data set in most places that I can use a raster in ArcGIS. I can also export this mosaic data set now to a new raster using geoprocessing tools. If we had more time, I would show you that, but for now, just know that there are geoprocessing tools in here. And the tool that lets us do that is down under Raster Dataset. It's the copy raster tool that we'd use to copy rasters from any other format to any other format. And we can select, as it says, a mosaic dataset that we want to copy and select a different output raster format. Another thing I want to point out that we're not going to cover in this particular lecture is that mosaic datasets aren't just useful for merging distinct pieces like this that already don't overlap. One of the main reasons you might mosaic data is if you have overlapping imagery or overlapping sensor data. And mosaicing helps you resolve conflicts in between your overlaps. You set rules of which data to use in the overlap, and you get a seamless raster out of potentially overlapping rasters still. That's a big use case for mosaicing. So let's take just a quick look at that conceptually from ArcGIS help. So what we just did was more akin to this top part here, taking a bunch of different pieces, in fact the same number just by chance, and turning them into a single raster dataset. What I was just talking about with the overlapping is taking images like this where we have some overlap between these images. This green part's here as well, and this little feature here is over here, and turning them into a single seamless raster. That's another use case for mosaicing. We'll probably touch on that a little more in the next class when we work with imagery more, but just know that that's a possibility. Keep that in the back of your mind for that day in the future where you need to use it. For now, just remember that mosaicing helps us merge rasters into a single data set. It's a big topic on its own and one I encourage you to explore if you need it, but at the very least, with what we've shown you here, you can get started with it. Okay, that's it for this lecture. In this lecture, I showed you how to take multiple rasters and turn them into a single raster by the process of mosaicing and creating mosaic data sets in ArcGIS. I hope you find that to be an interesting and useful tool. See you next time.